Hello and welcome to the Bearded Mystic podcast, and I'm your host Rahul N Singh. Thank you for taking out the time today to either watch or listen to this podcast episode. Today I want to talk about shadow work. It's something that's discussed a lot on these Discord spiritual servers, and everyone seems to think that shadow work is very important, which it is. But is it something that happens post-enlightenment or before enlightenment? And that's where Advaita Vedanta comes in, because I think it comes in before enlightenment or before self-realization. The reason for this is that shadow work does not equal enlightenment. Just because you work on your shadows does not mean that once you've dealt with them all, that suddenly, you're enlightened now. No. Shadow work or these prerequisites are kind of necessary for us before we are ready for self-realization, before we're ready for Brahmgyan or for that wisdom which will tell us about our true nature, what our true nature is. So I'm not saying that shadow work is not necessary, but what I'm going to show you today is that shadow work has to be done prior any claim that one is self-realized, in my opinion. Now that's obviously up to me to say that. That's up to you to accept it. But anyway, before we go any further, do like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And let's have a look at this. So what we're going to do here is actually look at how this relates to the 4 prerequisites that are kind of known in Vedanta for you to kind of do. So the first one that we have is obviously Vivek, which is the discrimination, the discernment between the real and the unreal, or the permanent and the impermanent, or transient. Now, this Vivek has to be kind of really developed. It's not something, I would say if you've not developed that key understanding here, we cannot move to the next stage in spirituality. It's very important for us to understand what is real and unreal. Having that definition is important. Yes, in the non-dual state, the real and unreal matters very less. It doesn't, obviously it's beyond that. But this is us as a seeker. We are in dualism, so how do we deal with this? So in shadow work, yes, the first step is about becoming aware of your unconscious patterns and to see what is hidden here. What are the things that you aren't dealing with? One could even say that this is linked to rag and dvesh. Dvesh meaning what you have an aversion to. So when we have an aversion to something, we tend not to go there. We tend not to go down that path, so to speak. Or whatever we dislike, we're like, okay, I want to stay away from that. I don't want to deal with that. But as a realized person, or as someone who is enlightened, what should our action be when it comes to rag and dvesh? Well, rag and dvesh shouldn't be existing in us. We accept life as it is. We accept karma as it is. We accept the way life brings about things in our life. There's no... Our will becomes very, very minimal in this. So shadow work does something very interesting here. It says, deal with what is hidden, and that's true. Like if you have, say, a hidden aspect of you that you don't like to take criticism, or you don't like to take in feedback, or you don't like to deal with compliments, that's what shadow work can do. Now Vivek, obviously, the discernment trains us that whatever is the eternal, that's Brahman, and the transient is this mind, the emotions, the ego. So we understand that shadow work is not happening to the permanent, it's not happening to the eternal, it's not happening to consciousness. Yes, this has to be understood. It's not happening to consciousness. It is happening to our mind, our emotions, and our ego. So what we can do whenever we are going through something, when we're going through a situation, what we can do is say, is this arising from truth? Or is this all mental noise? And when we ask that question, we inquire, and we keep inquiring until we deal with that mental noise. And when we are going through anything in life, check if the response that we're giving is coming from a place of truth. Is it helping our dharma? Is it based in dharma, or is it something that is based in adharma, meaning that's going against nature, that's going against the flow of karma, the flow of life? Now, obviously, we may have psychological shadows. That may be anger, guilt, shame. Guilt is a big thing these days. People are feeling guilty all the time, and half the issues aren't really their fault. It's just, unfortunately, the cards that are dealt with when it comes to life. But what we can do is we can see this anger, we can see this guilt, and we can see this shame, and first see where it's arisen from, what has triggered it, and then through our Vivek, understand that ultimately these are unreal because they're emotional states. They're psychological states. They will disappear. They will dissolve. One time I'm feeling that guilt, the next minute I'm not. And that's why, because it's changing, it's unreal. So through our Vivek, we can see that it's unreal. That doesn't mean that we don't deal with it. It's just we understand that its nature is very temporary. So in that temporary time, we have to deal with it. Okay? But remember that your permanent state, which is consciousness, that is untouched by these psychological shadows. So what happens here when we have enough Vivek, then the seeker doesn't suppress the shadow, they just see through it. So when there's guilt there, you see guilt. When you see shame, you see shame. When you see anger, you see anger. And you realize that, what? It's okay. You see right through it. You don't get more angry, you don't get more guilt, and you don't get more shame. Or you don't say, well, I'm not guilty, or I'm not shameful, or I'm not angry. You don't have to say these things. When you see through something, you don't have to say a single word when you're dealing with them. So what you can acknowledge is that these feelings that I'm getting, they're arising from my mind, okay? But I know that I'm not the mind. But the mind is going through this, so I have to deal with this for the mind's sake. But it's got nothing to do with my true nature as consciousness, as Brahman. So that's an important thing. And then we have Vairagya, which is obviously detachment or non-attachment. And shadow work is very, it tells us, let go of the emotional attachment. Whether that's to our past, to our wounds, and even our identities. And yes, we do have to let go of them. It's very difficult when, even if we are a victim of something, sometimes we gather the identity of that victim and we know that it will receive a particular response. So if it receives a particular response, it makes your ego feel good, right? So it only perpetuates identity and ego, and only allows us to stick more to our wounds than actually dealing with them and actually resolving them. So Vairagya is like that surgical blade that cuts our identification. So, when it comes to our desires, our fears, our achievements, our failures, all of those things, detachment will say, you know what? There's no need to identify with this. It's happened, desires occurred, okay. Fear has occurred, okay. You don't have to say, I am in fear. You don't say, I am desiring. Yeah, desire arises. So that detachment, you see the language difference there. So you're not abandoning desire, you're saying desire is arising. Okay, so one doesn't abandon anything. One doesn't say, oh, let's just suppress it down and not see it. No, one sees it. One then analyzes it. Well, what purpose will it bring? What end result is there if I follow this through? That's what detachment brings. Detachment allows us to see the bigger picture, and that's what's more important, is seeing the bigger picture. And you know, even when we have that craving for praise, you know, if I show humility, you know, oh, I want to be praised for that, or I do a good podcast episode and someone says well done, that's, you know, that's a craving for praise. Or if I see that a video hasn't done well and I have that fear of rejection, one has to move beyond that. It doesn't mean that if a video doesn't do well that I say I have been rejected. No, just the video didn't do well. Or say people praise this video and it goes viral. I don't have to say, oh, I've gone viral. Yeah, the video got viral. That's it. Simple. And that's what Vairagya does. That's what detachment does. So true detachment allows the shadow material to come up and pass. So we allow it to arise and we allow it to pass. So we no longer cling to it, nor do we avoid it. So for example, I don't keep saying, well, oh yeah, my video got viral, I've gone viral, I am viral, I've been rejected. I don't have to keep doing that. I don't have to cling to that idea, nor do I need to avoid it. I don't have to say, you know, if I know that a video hasn't done well, I should acknowledge it. But I don't have to be like, oh, I don't want to see if a video did really bad, you know? Like that's, or somebody writes in the comments and trolls and says, you know, you don't understand anything, you're not enlightened, blah, blah, blah. Fine. One doesn't need to avoid those comments either. See them. What does it really affect who you are, what you are as consciousness? And that's, and yes, there's a dualism at play here. I'm acknowledging that. But in the beginning, we are all playing with this dualism. And in this episode, I'm not dealing with the non-duality. I'm saying, you know what? Let's deal with the dualism here. That itself needs to be cut eventually. But while we're on this path, how do we deal with it? So, again, if you see that fear, if you see that shame, if you see that desire arise, you can say, oh, that's just a vasana. It's come up today, but it's not me. It's not mine. I don't own this vasana. It's just prakriti. It's just nature playing itself out. The nature of the body desires this, and that's how I see it. I don't need to be like, oh, you know, I am desiring this. I'm fearing this. No, you know, nature's telling me to fear something. Maybe there's a reason for that fear. You know, maybe there's a snake there and nature's telling me that don't go further. You know, instinct. So one has to be really acute and understand that shadow work is about letting go of our attachment. And same thing here. We are doing the same thing when we come to detachment. We are detached from this body-mind identification, the story, the narrative that we built up and we've been building and the one that we've been sustaining. And we let go of that and we remain in formless awareness, because that is our true nature, and that's what detachment brings. Then we have the sampati, so we have the 6 inner virtues. So this is where we really integrate and the mastery happens, and this is where it really kind of shows how far we've got in our spirituality. So here, you know, when you have sama, the mastery of the mind, you don't have to react when shadows arise. You just simply observe it. They come up, okay. Anger arised, okay. But what am I? I'm pure consciousness, I am Brahman. Anger is there. I see anger. I see through this anger. Where is this anger going to take me if I let it go? Sometimes we're in the heated argument, say with our parents, say with our spouses, our kids. What about then? You know what? Still be the observer. If you're feeling anger heat up inside of you, you know what? That's the time to have a look. Why is this moment triggering anger in you? And that's something you can do. So the mind doesn't necessarily become a battlefield now, it becomes a mirror. So the mind allows you, because now you're telling the mind, let's observe this situation. Yeah. Something has come up inside of me. I need to do something about it. So then we have Dhamma, which is the mastery of the senses. The senses are a wild one. Now, shadows, they often leak out through our speech, our compulsions, our habits. And what Dhamma does here is it helps us pause the outward expression of that inner restlessness. So what happens is, instead of reacting with speech or reacting with a certain compulsive behavior, or when we are really compulsive and we want to just or impulsive, we just want to do something because that's what we've always done habitually, we take our time, we pause and we say, is the action I'm doing the right one? Is it the one that's going to be for the betterment of not just me, this body and mind, but for others? We forget the others more. And sometimes even when we think we're thinking about others, it's actually to meet our own needs, our own desires. For example, we may say, I want to give my kid everything that I didn't get in my life. But that doesn't mean that we do it without mindfulness. First, we should see, if I didn't get something in my childhood, was there a certain value that was built from that? Did it actually help me in the long run? And would it in today's day and time be good for my child to have it? Certain things like that. For example, with my kid, whenever we're busy, we sometimes put the TV on, so he watches Bluey or Miss Rachel. Now, it's not good. So for past, he was getting addicted to it. So for the past few days, for this past week, we've hidden the remote control and we've controlled our own selves. Whenever we felt like we want to just turn the TV on, I felt that inside me. I felt it arising up in my mind, and my senses saying, where's the TV remote? I could process all of that. But then I would think, what, for the long run, it's not good for him. He's wanting the TV now. And so little things like that, they become, so yes, maybe I was able to watch TV as a kid, but did it do me any good? And will it do my son any good? So it's little things like that where you get to pause what you're doing, and then you see, am I just going to unconsciously go to the remote control, turn it on because my son is crying? Or am I going to just let my son cry out just so he knows that actually this is not good for him? And there's a reason why, his mom and dad don't want him to watch TV. So, you just reclaim power from that unconscious behavior. So, you see, everyone thinks that it's important to think fast. I would say it's better to think slow when necessary. Allow your mind to think fast when it comes to like dangerous situations, but in situations where there's no danger, like in order to buy something or to watch something or to go on your phone or whatever it may be, like just take some level of pause and see, are my senses taking me to the right direction? Whether that's like eating junk food. Do I need to eat the junk food? And little things like that where we can just stop and pause and reclaim power from unconsciously eating, unconsciously watching, unconsciously scrolling. And you see my point there. And then there's uparati, which is the withdrawal from distraction. You see, whenever we try to avoid something in life, that can be a shadow defense. So what happens with uparati is that you actually go inwards and you don't hide away from discomfort. Like by watching TV or by going out for a drive or by going shopping or whatever the mind will be kind of, but the mind will be strengthened. But here, when you're feeling discomfort, actually just go in, just turn inward and see Why are you feeling that discomfort? Where is it arising from? And is your response to it even healthy? Is it even necessary? And again, when it comes to blame, if you're feeling kind of, when you blame yourself for something that's gone wrong, turn inwards and see, well, did the circumstances help you? Yes, could you have done something different, but was the circumstances such that you didn't think of other options, and it's only an afterthought that you thought of better options? And that can happen. Sometimes we do not give the best reactions. That's why we should always pause and give a response. But sometimes life demands that we react. And that's why we should just pause, think, is it worth, not just blame myself, sometimes we blame others for the wrongs that happen. But is it right for us to blame them also? Where is that coming from? And then any external fixes, we think that, if I go out shopping, I'll feel better. Or if I watch TV, I'll feel better. If I eat some ice cream, I'll feel better. But these external fixes actually don't help us within. So we need to withdraw ourselves away from distraction. We don't want to distract ourselves from what's actually happening within us. If we want to transcend the mind, we have to deal with the mind. We have to deal with what's going on within. We have to deal with those veils that is stopping us from realizing what our true nature is, which is pure consciousness, which is Brahman. But we can't realize that because for that to be seen, there has to be purity. There has to be clear seeing, and consciousness will always seem hazy if we haven't been able to do this type of work beforehand. So look, Advaita Vedanta is literally telling us to do shadow work beforehand. So this is not a new concept for Vedanta. This is something that's been there for a long time, and there's a reason for it. Then titiksha, the endurance of pain and discomfort. One things that sometimes we like to avoid, but frankly we have to deal with pain and discomfort. So this is actually the most direct bridge to shadow work, because can you, when you're feeling pain, when you're feeling discomfort, can you sit in that fire of what's triggering you without flinching or identifying? So when you're going through pain, can you just endure and not say, why am I in pain? Don't even ask that question. Don't identify with it. Why am I feeling angry? Don't identify. Why am I feeling discomfort? Don't identify with it. Why am I feeling unhappy? Don't identify with it. Don't flinch due to it. Don't react. So if you feel grief, if you feel rage, if you feel jealousy, and you feel them surfacing up and you feel them very strongly, then allow them to arise fully. Allow that grief. Allow the outpouring of grief. Endure it. If you're feeling rage, Osho used to give this very great technique, and in my opinion is the best thing to do. If you feel angry, then take your anger out at an inanimate object like a pillow. Better to do a pillow, not a wall, because a wall will cause permanent damage and something you'll have to fix later. But with a pillow, just hit the pillow. Get your rage out. Shout and scream in the pillow. Like, instead of shouting at somebody where you could actually just perpetuate the problem further and just, they will only pass that anger on, why don't you just not express your anger to the person that it should be expressed to, but do first with a pillow, just so. And if you still feel angry after a couple of days, then you should deal with it. But what will change then is your anger will be less with identifying it at somebody else. It will be like, okay, I let the expression of what triggered whatever triggered me, it caused anger. So I let the anger flow, and I let go of the anger now because I dealt with it. The poor pillow had to deal with it. But now I can actually look at the issue that triggered the anger. So then you can have a conversation, you can have a discussion, while otherwise it would have been a blame game. And you see, sometimes that's what we need to learn to do. So allow that, if you feel jealousy, allow it to surface fully, and don't repress it, and don't indulge in it either. So, for example, if you feel jealousy, don't go spying and see, is it true if my partner's doing this, or my parents are doing this, or my siblings doing this? Don't do that. And even with rage, like I said, don't indulge in it with other people. And don't inflict harm upon yourself either, on your body. Like I said, you can hit the pillow, it'd be a better solution. Then we have Shraddha, which is faith in the teachings and the path. So, shadow work often brings up despair. Will I ever be free? Will I ever attain Jivan Mukti? Will I ever be able to live a happy life? Will I ever be free from the clutches of my parents, or my children, or my spouse, or of my workplace? But Shraddha anchors us. Having that faith is important, because what we understand is that the discomfort that we feel is not failure. It's in fact a purification. It's showing us where we can purify ourselves. We don't have to condemn that what's causing the discomfort. We can actually honor it and have faith that it will improve us. That's what happens with purifying the mind, Chitta Shuddhi, and that's what we should aim to do. Then there's Samadhana, which is inner focus, stillness, and absorption. So the shadow arises, and you don't have to get swept up in it. Yeah, you don't have to be like, oh, I'm in I have to deal with this shadow. No, just remain anchored in the witness. Be in awareness that, for example, the waves rise up. Does it disturb the ocean? No. Likewise, let the feelings rise up, let the shadows arise, let the anger arise, let the jealousy, the grief, the discomfort all arise. But remember, you are the awareness to which all of this is happening. You are the witness to all of this that is happening. You are not those things. You are not the jealousy, you are not the grief, you are not the anger, you are not the discomfort. You are the witness. You are the observer, you are this Brahman, you are that Tattvam Asi. You are this formless awareness. And all these forms that are arising, they are not you. Yeah? They are transient. You are permanent. But these things are transient. And then the final one, which is Mumukshutva. So the one that has the intense desire for liberation. So, modern shadow work tends to end in personal empowerment or wholeness. But Mumukshutva actually takes it a step further. So it says, I don't want to have a better ego here. I want freedom from the ego. And so, the sincere seeker will be willing to face every shadow, face every illusion that he has. And that's because the pull of the Atma, the pull of one's formless awareness, is a lot stronger than the fear of that shadow, the fear of that ego. And that's what we can understand. So what happens here is that we don't start, for example, we stop saying, how do I fix myself? We start asking, well, who is this me that's even wanting to be fixed? Does this me need fixing? So find out, who is this me? Who is this I that is saying this? And when you get to that I-ness, you will relax, and you'll realize this awareness, this consciousness does not need to have further liberation. It doesn't need, it doesn't need to deal, it doesn't have shadows. Shadows don't exist in consciousness. So that's important to understand. So we can look at other aspects, other scenarios. In fact, I can give one. Let's go through some scenarios and how Advaita would respond to that. So we looked at the sadhana chaturthi, and we'll look at, we'll conclude that in a minute. But let's look at actual scenarios. So, for example, you may say this is a shadow work point, that you get triggered by people who are arrogant or controlling, and you just say, I can't stand those people, And Advaita will say, well, that trigger points to an unknown part of your own psyche. That's true. But Vedanta will ask, who is the one that is getting triggered here? And the reactions that arise in the mind, but you are the silent witness behind them. So do you see how Advaita actually deals with it fully? So it doesn't tell you to just stay with the shadow. It tells you how to deal with the shadow and why you're not the shadow. And the shadow is not you. It's not the shadow. The shadow can never be a part of pure consciousness, of pure being, of pure awareness, of formless awareness. So even that shadow is illumined by awareness, but it has no power of its own. That shadow cannot, if it had to battle with pure consciousness will win, because by default, because there's no such thing as a shadow. So, but what you'll be able to see is, once you say, well, who is the one that is getting triggered, what happens there is you see the cause of the trigger rather than, oh, I'm being triggered. So that's the difference. Someone may say, I feel shame about parts of my past. It's like I'm secretly unworthy. And Advaita would say, you know what? Shame belongs to the body-mind story, to that narrative. But it does not belong to the Atma. It does not belong to pure consciousness. It does not belong to Brahman. This Atma, this Brahman, this pure consciousness is untouched by history. Automatically we're able to deal with the shadow. So the way to see that is, when these feelings arise, see that past of yours, those feelings, as just a movie projected onto that awareness, that consciousness, that screen of consciousness. You are the screen, not the scene that's happening in the movie. Then a third one, I try to control how others see me, and I'm afraid of being judged. Big one nowadays, especially if you're on social media. And, Advaita will say, this fear that you have is from an identification with the ego, the image, the self-image you have, this false self that you're building up on, say, social media. And the one who fears judgment is not real. It's a thought form. So the real you is beyond name and form. So what we do here is we let the ego die in the fire of self-inquiry, because you lose nothing but the unreal. The unreal dissolves away. You remain as you are, that pure consciousness. So abandon those false narratives. If the thing is, you're going to be judged by others. Unfortunately, that's the nature of of people. So don't be afraid of it. Accept it. But you don't have to be beholden to their judgments. They don't have to define you. One that I see a lot actually in spirituality, and one that I sometimes do get asked this, that I avoid silence and stillness. Being alone with myself actually brings up discomfort, and actually people do feel alone by being with themselves. And again, Advaita Vedanta will say that discomfort is not with who you truly are, this Atma, this pure self. It's with the contents of your mind. You don't want to deal with them. So Vedanta will further on say, remain as a witness. That way, you can allow the discomforts to arise, dissolve, and pass away, like clouds present in the sky. Whatever the clouds may be, they may be dark, they may be light, there may be different shapes and forms. Let them pass by. They may be heavy, they may be light, let them pass by. You are that sky that's unaffected by the weathering of those clouds. Yeah, so you're not what appears in the silence, you are the silence itself, and that's the teaching you can remember. One that people do, we have habitual patterns, so we may keep on repeating toxic patterns and be like, but I know better, but I keep doing it and I don't know how to stop myself. And so here, Advaita will say, karma and vasanas, they only bind us, but they only bind the one that thinks they're the doer. So shift from I must fix myself to who is the one that says it needs fixing? Who is the one that is acting here, that's pretending to be the doer here? So when the doer dissolves, action becomes spontaneous for us. Action becomes free of ignorance, free of binding. And we don't need to, when we can be the non-doer, it helps much more, because as we learn that we're not the body and mind. We are this Atma, we are this true consciousness. So, as you see, those were some examples, and as we learned from the Sadhana Chatushtaya, that it's a complete inner work that goes on. Yeah, it includes every aspect of shadow work, plus the direct path to moksha. So that's why Advaita Vedanta is seen as very important. So shadow work is important because it helps refine the mind, which is necessary. It's a good thing. But Vedanta helps you to realize that I'm not the instrument, I'm not the mind, I am the light that shines through it. The mind is what is being illumined here by consciousness. So you don't just integrate your shadow, you realize you were never the one casting your shadow. And that's the most powerful thing that Advaita Vedanta brings to you. So as I end this episode, in the first week of the course, we look into this. We deal with the 4 prerequisites. And again, the reason being that unless we work on ourself, on who we think we are, this body and mind that we've been accustomed to identifying with, and now we realize there's something more than that, then we can start working on understanding what is real and unreal. And that's when real shadow work starts. So Advaita Vedanta deals with shadow work beforehand. It helps you to be prepared for Brahmgyan, for Atma Bodh. And if people think that after enlightenment you have to deal with the shadows, it means that you didn't do any work prior to enlightenment. And if that is the case, say, and it's possible, someone may get enlightened and didn't deal with their shadows, just make sure that you start working on them. And I would avoid claiming enlightenment. A lot of people, I'm part of some discourse and every person claims to be enlightened. And it's very easy to feel that you're enlightened if you only have yourself to deal with. But when you have to deal with people, with society, with things that may trigger you, then it's much more satisfying to work on yourself, because then you can quickly see what's causing these shadows to appear, what's causing these triggers in the mind. So fundamentally, Vedanta says this is all in your mind, and we have to slowly but surely separate who we really are to the mind. So the mind is an instrument, a tool, not what we should identify with. This clear seeing that happens only occurs when we've done the necessary work, and I hope that a lot of us do the necessary work beforehand to be ready for self-realization, which is available to anybody It's not like you have to be someone special or fortunate or a chosen one. It's available to everyone. It's just that you have to be honest to do the work. And like I said, if you feel like you're enlightened, but you haven't done the shadow work, please don't declare it, because other people will flock to you and you will only cause more harms with your shadows, because now it will be an enlightened shadow. But if you've done your shadow work beforehand and you've followed these 4 prerequisites, you've done that work that's necessary, and you've had that Brahmgyan and you've become self-realized, you've become enlightened, or you are enlightened, you realize that you've always been this true self and you are pure consciousness, this formless, this infinite one. You're the oneness. You see yourself in all and all in yourself. You're in bliss, you're in happiness. You do not put others down. You are not angry at others. You do not get disturbed by others. Then, even then, your life will speak your enlightenment. So that's all I have to say. It's a pretty long episode. I hope you liked it. I mean, I hear a lot about shadow work and everyone keeps talking about it. And I always think, from a point of Advaita Vedanta, this is a very minor part. But yes, it's a very substantial, very important part too. So people tend to ignore it and think, I'd rather get to know I'm consciousness. It's more exotic, it's more amazing, right? But actually, it gets even more amazing when you've dealt with your mind beforehand, when you're able to deal with those triggers beforehand, and then suddenly you get this consciousness is revealed to you. You see it with fresh eyes, because what can happen is that you see this Brahman and you're like, well, I always knew this. Well, again, that's the mind telling you that you've already seen it. It's the mind that received it. Consciousness did not reveal itself in that moment. It's a very subtle point. Only a few people will grasp what I've just said, but this is the majority of the case. So anyway, I'll leave it here. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you think, and share what you feel as well. Maybe I've missed something out. Maybe there's a point that I haven't addressed that I should address, or we can talk about it in the comments. Or maybe there's some things I've got wrong. That can happen. I've got to see through it. So anyway, take care. Namaste. Bye.